when we're talking about trauma, we're not just talking about emotions. You know, like people think it's just about emotions. Like, oh, I'm so sad because this happened to me. That's not the totality of trauma. Sometimes trauma happens from neglect. Neglect is really powerful when there is nobody there that loved you. And by love, I mean giving you tools to take care of yourself, to have a good sense of identity, to have, you know, language, culture, belonging, meaning, all of those things. That's really what makes up wealth, is knowing who you are and knowing what your life is about and knowing that you have meaning. That's what, you know, really makes the base of a person.
Talking about examples of discrimination and prejudice, you know, encounters in Southern Alberta, as any Indigenous person, it happens on a daily basis. And this is one thing I talk about with my classes, is that on a daily basis, I hope one day I can get to a point where, or my family can get to a point where my, you know, children and my grandchildren don't have to teach their children about etiquette as an Indigenous person going into a store. So I'll explain that. From a very young age, I had to teach my daughter, you know, don't put your hands in your pockets when you're walking in the store. You can't bring your toys in when you're going into a store. You know, you can't bring snacks in when you're going into a store, because there's always that assumption that it's been stolen or taken from that store. I know as an Indigenous woman and a single Indigenous woman, when I go into a store, when I want to go to town or go to an event, I have to look presentable. I can't get away with wearing sweatpants and my hair in a bun because I'll be followed. And it becomes really tedious to have to think about that on a daily basis. And when you think about the amount of stress that is just constantly going through our bodies, that amount of cortisol, that heightened flight or fight response, we can see how that impacts our health. You know, we know that stress levels have a huge impact, a negative impact on our health. And so those little things that I think we've normalized are not normal. And I don't think a lot of non-Indigenous peoples even realize that those are some of the things that are running through our brains every single day. And those are contributing factors to what we see today.
I don't feel safe in the city. I don't feel safe in other cities. I don't feel safe anywhere else in Canada. The safest place I feel is on the reserve. As soon as I cross the river and get to the reserve, it's just a weight is lifted off my shoulders. Like, oh, finally, you know, like I'm away from all that craziness. And I'm back to something safe and normal and good.
I grew up in foster care, knowing nothing about my family, and my husband and I had 7 years of horrible times. Racism took over us, and we struggled for 7 years. I watched my husband pass away. No one knows what I'm going through. The only person that knows what I'm going through is me.
You know, here we are going as Blackfoot people, pre-colonial, and then here is colonization. We hit this clash to where they tried to wipe us out, they tried to assimilate us into them, but we didn't go along with them. We continued on as Blackfoot people.
While really important to talk about intergenerational traumas and seeing where those things stem from, I think a lot of times Indigenous peoples are talked about in a very deficits-based narrative that we forget we're strong people. We wouldn't be here today if we weren't. And so I think the message that I want to send forward is we have intergenerational strengths. And we need to start looking at those intergenerational strengths to create a future that we see viable for our children and our grandchildren and our future generations. And I think right now we're in a healing phase where we need to talk about those traumas. We see them. We see them in addictions. We see them in apprehensions. We see those things. But I think a lot of times settler societies, organizations, institutions, they want to focus on that. And I think that we as Indigenous peoples, we need to start thinking about our strengths and drawing on those so that we can move forward.